Hey, what's up everybody? I gotta tell y'all something. AI is getting out of hand. Real talk.
On Monday, February 2nd, 2026, Elon Musk announced that SpaceX had acquired xAI for $250 billion. Rumors about this merger have been floating around for a while, but now it's official. Combined, SpaceX and xAI are reportedly worth around $1.25 trillion, making SpaceX by far the most valuable company in the world. And all of this is happening just as they're gearing up to go public in what will probably be the largest IPO in history.
You gotta pay attention to the play here. When you see SpaceX acquiring a tech startup like xAI, it's usually to gain access to xAI advanced models and their talent. And I'm pretty sure SpaceX had other means of accessing AI by simply having a partnership, like with OpenAI, Anthropic, or even Google. But it's a lot different when you own that technology, because you get to dictate exactly what you want to do with that technology. Instead of having to okay it with the company that gave you access to their AI, why not just own the technology yourself? Do whatever you want with it.
Recently, Elon has been increasingly vocal about wanting to build AI data centers in space, which on the surface sounds either like pure sci-fi fantasy or the worst combination of Silicon Valley buzzwords that you could ever string together. But the fact is, SpaceX is one of the most important companies in the world right now, and dozens of companies, Google, Nvidia, Blue Origin, are actively developing technology for this. By merging these companies together, Elon is making a historic bet that an entirely new industry is being born here at the intersection of AI and space.
Based on my personal understanding, AI requires data centers to function. But the thing about those data centers is that they take up a significant amount of space. And where those data centers are placed here on Earth are neighborhoods that affect people, because they take up the space that could be made for hospitals, schools, you name it. So I would ask Elon Musk, yo, is there a possibility that the data centers are placed here on Earth? Could you take them up there in space as well? That way we can leave those available spaces for other things, for more suitable things.
But most importantly, he's betting that he can be the one that completely dominates them. As SpaceX gets ready to enter public markets, this merger fundamentally changes how we have to think about it as a business. So first, how did we even get to the point where building AI data centers in space is something we are seriously considering? Well, I don't know if you've heard, but we are currently in an AI boom. Whether there's an AI bubble or not, this technology is here to stay.
When I reflect upon the SpaceX acquisition, I can't do nothing but hope that it's for the sake of bettering humanity and expanding upon our capabilities. But I highly doubt it though. I wouldn't be surprised if it's simply just to get a one-up on their competitors. Because when you're in a fierce competition, especially with tech corporations, you're gonna do whatever you can to win. You're gonna do whatever you can to get an advantage. Best believe that.
ChatGPT has 800 million weekly active users, which means the demand for AI is here, it is real, and it is growing insanely fast. The problem is, our current AI infrastructure is running into some pretty hard limits. To keep up with demand over the past 3 years, companies like OpenAI and Meta and Google have had to build massive data centers where all of the compute to run these systems happens. Meta, for example, is building a data center in Louisiana that covers an area of 4 million square feet, bigger than freaking Disneyland. By some estimates, it would cover lower Manhattan.
So this got me thinking, two scenarios. The first scenario is you guys are taking the data centers here on Earth and taking them up in space and expanding upon those data centers. The second scenario is, yo, Earth doesn't have any more capacity to build more data centers, so we're just gonna go to space and build data centers in space and make more data centers there. The second scenario is horrible. You know why? Because that lets me know your ambitions are too ambitious. How much space do you guys need, dog? For real. Y'all gotta get this stuff under control, man. Real talk.
All over the world, there are hundreds of data centers being built, and we are getting to the point where the problems they are causing are becoming impossible to ignore. Data centers take up enormous amounts of land, they consume staggering amounts of water and electricity, and in many cases, they're already causing long-term economic and environmental damage to the communities around them. Now, we live in a world where technology companies move far faster than the institutions that regulate them. Laws take time to write, they take time to pass, and even more time to enforce. So in theory, these companies can keep building and building for years.
I'm gonna try my best to give you the perspective of those people that are living in those communities affected by data centers. I would like to assume that before the data centers came into those communities, there was a set price that people were already accustomed to when it comes to goods and services. But ever since those data centers came in, they affected that pricing. The pricing went up. So now your electric bill goes up, your water bill goes up, your mortgage goes up, and a lot of other other stuff, the pricing goes up with it as well. So there's a high chance you're gonna have to probably end up leaving that area because it's just unsustainable financially for you. That's the problem I have with data centers.
But regulation isn't even the wall they're running into. Building so many data centers, at least on Earth, runs into three hard, unavoidable physical constraints: land, energy, and heat. Let's break them down. Land is relatively simple. These data centers can't be built just anywhere. Nobody really wants to have one in front of their house. But energy is where things start to get a little more complicated. Training GPT-3, a language model that is 2 generations old, took as much electricity as 120 average American households use every year. GPT-4 reportedly took 40 to 50 times as much energy as that. And you can imagine this trend continuing as these models get even larger.
I have a hard time satiating my curiosity when it comes to matters that pertain to AI. And when I look at ChatGPT and I evaluate its electricity consumption, it's absurd. And I can't help but to question who's the one that covers those costs. And the reality is, the company probably pays the bare minimum. The one who closes the gap on those costs are probably me and you. And the sad part is, the benefit seems to be a one-way street. And that street seems to be headed towards the company, as opposed to us. Let's just be real, man. Let's just call it what it is.
But what's worse is that in the long term, running these models is even more energy intensive. Goldman Sachs projects that by 2030, data centers could consume around 11% of the entire energy output of the United States. That's one industry, potentially eating up more than a tenth of the country's power supply 4 years from now. And the American power grid is already strained enough as it is. And now, as for heat, that's where things get really concerning. The chips inside these data centers run on electricity, right? So when they do work, they get hot, really hot. And to cool them down, you need water. Basically what you do is you pump water through the building, it absorbs all the heat from the servers, and then you spray it into the air where it evaporates and carries the heat away.
Would you be okay if the same water you use every single day had to be shared with giant AI data centers? Probably not. The part that got me thinking is, we need water to drink, cook, grow food, take a shower, use the bathroom. If these data centers are using huge amounts of that same water, I can't help but wonder what happens in places where water is already limited. That's what messes with me. The fact that this is even something we have to think about.
It's basically sweating, but for computers. On average, a single data center could evaporate up to 2 million liters of water every single day, almost an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Globally, data centers consume 560 billion liters per year, and by 2030, that's expected to hit 1.2 trillion. That's more like 480,000 Olympic swimming pools.
Dang, that's a lot of water consumption. I would love to talk about the effects of water evaporating in the air, but the reality is, there's no effects. It's not like basically driving a car and your exhaust is exuding a lot of gas and it comes in the air and it affects the environment. Here they're using water to cool down their data centers. At least that's the positive, right?
So you've got 3 hard limits on building data centers here: land, energy, and water. Resources that are not infinite and that are desperately needed by the communities around them. At some point, you start to realize that Earth physically cannot sustain the amount of compute required to keep scaling AI, and no amount of optimizing or incremental improvements is going to change that. We can't just keep building more data centers here on Earth, which is how you end up with an idea that honestly sounds like it was taken from Star Wars.
I think all this does is just further highlights the lack of regulation that comes from the government to these tech corporations. The laws are too slow. By the time they even make laws to regulate these tech corporations about the amount of space that they can use to make these data centers, it's already too late. I would like to believe that if there was actual limitations set on these tech corporations about the amount of data centers that they can make, we wouldn't be running into these type of problems. Do you know how big Earth is? You guys need to picture that. And you're telling me Earth is not enough to fulfill your endeavors? To allow you to have more data centers? That you need space? That's crazy, man.
In November 2025, a Google and Nvidia-backed startup called StarCloud launched a refrigerator-sized satellite with a GPU that actually trained a working AI language model in space that people on Earth could actually use. And the thing managed its own power, cooling, and operations by itself for 3 weeks. Now, obviously, you can't exactly call that a data center. It was one satellite with one chip training a very small model. To do this at scale would require solving hundreds of immense engineering challenges, like how do you protect the chips from solar radiation? How do you deal with maintenance? How do you design radiators to dissipate the heat? How do you make your satellites as lightweight as possible without sacrificing compute?
That's a lot of questions to consider. I would hope that if you're spending billions of dollars on an endeavor like this, you would have answers to those questions. And not only having the answers to those questions that he just asked, but also thinking about the consequences and the implications that might arise from pursuing something like this. That's just a food for thought, guys. Tech corporations, or SpaceX in this case, because this might be one of those things where you may not be able to undo. That's something I would deeply think about.
These are not small problems, but really none of them change the fact that we already did this. Not at the scale we'd need for advanced AI, but we did. And that brings us to the final and most important filter, economics. Because even if you can build a data center in space, it doesn't really matter if you can't make any money from it. Luckily, to find out if this is a good business idea, there's really only one question we need to answer. Is it cheaper to build and operate a data center in space than it is to do it here on Earth? And the answer to that, as far as we know, is maybe, sometime in the future.
If I had to guess, I would say that building data centers here on Earth is a lot cheaper than building data centers out there in space. Because let's be honest, guys, on Earth, we've been living here for a significant amount of time. And I'm pretty sure when a tech corporation or a company in general decides to build a data center, they account for a lot of stuff here on Earth, like electricity, water, because otherwise they wouldn't invest so much money on a data center if they don't know about the cost that it will take to make that data center. But out there in space, it's a lot risky because you've never been there.
I think it's important to say here that we just don't know, but that is business. These companies are taking a risk by investing in R&D for this, but if it pays off, it could be huge. Obviously, with unlimited energy from the sun, the long-term cost to operate these data centers could be remarkably lower than it is here on Earth. SpaceX is constantly improving their rockets. They're building more launch pads, and they just applied for permits to launch 1 million satellites. For context, right now, there are only 25,000 active Starlink satellites in orbit, so their plans are big.
So obviously we can all agree that having more and more data centers built here on Earth is not something that we look forward to. Earth data centers get very hot and need big fans to cool them down, which means consuming a lot of electricity. Space is already super cold, so it saves power. Big solar panels will catch the sunlight. The sun will give them all the electricity that they need to run. So when you take a good look at it, you start realizing about the benefits that come with having data centers in space. And also the new ways and technology and stuff that they're gonna do to have those data centers up there in space. And maybe they can take on from those lessons and apply them here on Earth to prevent so much electricity consumption and water consumption to stop affecting us people.
Now, we all know Elon can be a little optimistic when it comes to timeframes, but I mean, we've seen that this is possible. So if or when they actually manage to get costs down to where they need to be, this is going to happen. Of course, there are many challenges to be solved here. They are hard and they are serious. But the fact is, whether you think that building data centers in space is a good idea or not, hundreds of companies are already working on it. They have done their own calculus, which is probably a lot more sophisticated than mine, and the bottom line is, to them, this is a risk worth taking.
I don't know if you guys would agree with me, but it almost feels like these companies have found a space to build their data centers, and that space happens to be very vast, so they can build as much data centers as they want. And hopefully, which they most likely will because of how vast space is, they wouldn't feel the need to build any more data centers here on Earth because of how much space they have up there, if you catch my drift.
So that is why Elon and a growing part of the tech industry are so focused on pushing AI beyond Earth. We have barely just begun to explore what we can do with this technology and what it can do for us. They're doing this because if it actually works, it opens up entirely new ways to scale AI, orders of magnitude beyond what's possible here on Earth. Honestly, it's kind of incredible that this is even happening. For now, what we know for sure is this. Right now, we are seeing a potentially massive industry take its very first steps. I mean, AI is pushing humanity to make decisions on a planetary scale, which is something truly unique to our time, and witnessing it is extremely exciting.
All this information is fairly new to me, and the only thing exciting about this is that if it doesn't affect people down here on Earth. Because if a meteor hit Earth, that's very concerning. But if a meteor hits a different planet, we could all care less because it doesn't affect us. That's the same thing I have towards these data centers. Do whatever you want out there in space, as long as it doesn't come back to affect us. And that's all I gotta say. But what do you think about this whole plan that's about to go down? I'm curious to know what you think down in the comments below. But until then, peace and love. I'll see y'all next time.